Hello and welcome to the Private Capital Podcast. I'm Joe Riley, head of Circulus Group, which is a forum for the family office world. Anthony Scaramucci is the founder and managing partner of Skybridge Capital and the SALT Conference. We had a wide-ranging and candid conversation about his new book, his path from Port Washington to the White House, navigating the cutthroat world of Wall Street and politics, adapting his investment style to survive, and the importance of non-transactional networking. Anthony is the founder and managing partner of Skybridge Capital and founder and chairman of the SALT Conference. Prior to founding Skybridge in 2005, Scaramucci co-founded investment partnership Oscar Capital Management, which was sold to Neuberger Berman in 2001. Earlier, he worked in private wealth management at Goldman Sachs. Scaramucci briefly served as Chief Strategy Officer of the Export-Import Bank and as White House Communications Director in 2017. He is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and a board member of the Federal Enforcement Homeland Security Foundation. He is the author of 5 books and holds a BA in economics from Tufts University and a JD from Harvard Law School. Please enjoy my conversation with the always engaging Anthony Scaramucci.
This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Anything said by the guests or host should not be construed as legal or investment advice. Thanks for listening.
So I'll start with an anecdote. Back in 2009, when I was starting a family office network, which eventually grew to be one of the largest in the world, you were very helpful to us. You spoke once at a breakfast during some of the darkest days after the GFC and the debt crisis, and you gave a real old-fashioned stem winder of a speech. And afterwards, one of the older members comes up to me and he says, I don't know if I'd give that young fella any money, but I sure would vote for him. And so the question to you is, why didn't you go into politics?
Yeah, this is the weirdest part of my life, which I still don't really 100% understand. I had never any interest in politics. My interest has always been in, could I be an entrepreneur? My father was a laborer, and he made money by the hour, and he was under the control of his union, and he was always anxious about it. It created tremendous, and when you get older, you do 3 things with your parents, right? You have this, you look up to them in the beginning, right? And then you humanize them later in life. But in the beginning of life, you're worshiping them, right? And I looked at my father, and then I started to see I said, wow, this guy really broke his back to make our family its money. And it was very hard for him. I said, so someday I'm going to be working, to quote my father, I'm going to work indoors, out of direct sunlight with no heavy lifting. That's the type of job I want for you. That's what my old man used to say. I might bring this up because all I wanted to do was have my own business, make payroll, make sure I could afford people's healthcare expenses, all that. I had no interest in politics. But when I joined Goldman Sachs, I got fired from my investment banking job. And that was a terrible period of time for me as well. And then ironically, I got rehired into sales and trading. And I ended up as a private banker at Goldman. Okay, but now I'm from a blue-collar neighborhood. Even though I went to Harvard, I'm a young boy in an old boys network. I know nobody. I can't reach anybody. So how am I going to meet wealthy people? I can't hit a tennis ball. I don't know how to swing a golf club. How am I going to meet these people? And so I looked around and I said, okay, I can do this through politics. So I wrote my first check to Rudy Giuliani in 1993, young Republicans for Rudy, and he won. Now, this was fantastic for me, right? Because I got probably shouldn't say this on your podcast, I'm going to say it. I got the parking pass of parking passes, okay? I could park my car on 2 wheels on a fire hydrant in a handicap zone. And if you put the pass out, it was no problem. I mean, it was the best. And so I was working for Rudy, Tony Carbonetti, Eric Hazamamos, and I was on the team. And then I helped him with his reelect. And then he introduced me to Pataki. Now I'm working for Pataki. And then Rudy, because he's a little Looney Tunes, he left Pataki to endorse Andrew and Chris's father, Mario Cuomo, right? I was always a Republican because my dad's union was controlled by the Republicans. So I'm working for Pataki. Rudy leaves for Cuomo. Pataki wins. And then that rolled into George W. Bush. And then when Obama ran, it was a little different. I'm not really that political, but I went to law school with Obama. So I'm like, all right, I'll help him. I knew him. He's a good guy. As a president, he'll do an okay job. But he didn't really have the politics or the policies that I was the most interested in. So I went back to work as a Republican. And so I was the garden variety Republican Party fundraiser that opened a portal into a group of people I could have never met on my own without the politics. So I had no interest in being into politics. Also, I had no interest in being on television. That's the other weird part of my life. I went on television at the age of 45 because I thought my business was going out of business. This business, you're sitting in 2008, the global financial crisis that you're referencing, we had probably one of the worst years of my life. And I was like, okay, we're probably going out of business. I'm going to start this thing that we ended up calling SALT. And I'm going to end up as a third-party marketer, and I need a conference business. So let's start a conference business. And I thought it was like a going-away party on the Titanic. And we did it in Las Vegas, and we built the conference. And somebody said to me, you got to go on television to promote the conference. I said, okay, no problem. So Neil Cavuto, on the 17th of March, 2009, right at the bottom of the market, he put me on TV. It's the first time I ever went on TV. So I had no interest in politics. I had no interest in television. And all I do is talk about politics on television. It's the irony of life. But I don't see myself as a, first of all, and this is the truth about these politicians, you have to lie all the time. Now, everybody lies some of the time, but I don't want to lie all the time. I just think it's terrible for your soul. Kevin McCarthy and I are literally the exact same age. He looks 500 years old. He looks like Grandpa Munster at this point in his life. I don't want to look like that. I don't want to act like that. So no, I have no interest in politics because these are weird people and they do really bad things to serve themselves, and they're not interested in really serving the people. There's a few of them that are, but very few. Mike Bloomberg was a guy like that, but he didn't need the politics. He was worth billions of dollars and he just saw himself as a public servant. These other guys see themselves as self-servants. See the difference? So you want to hang out with self-servants all day? I don't have any interest in that. Now, my stupidity is I was working for Bush. He came out of the race. Trump recruited me into his campaign, and now it's my stupidity. And my wife was ready to kill me, and I do write about that. I mean, my wife hates Trump almost as much as Melania. Okay, there are people that hate Trump more than Melania. They, you know, the vice president, I think Pence probably hates him now more than Melania. But that's my standard of Trump hatred. Hate more than Melania or less than Melania. So my wife was like right up there. She said, do not do this. You mentioned Vinny Viola at the early part of this. He was going to be Secretary of the Army. He pulled out because he had his ego in control and he had his pride in control. He's a smarter guy than me. I had my pride amped up. I had my ego amped up. I wanted to be in the White House working for the American president. I wanted to be where Rudy has tragically had his comeuppance. There's an expression in politics, are you in the motorcade? Are you inside the velvet rope? Are you traveling on Air Force One? Are you in the cabinet room? And my ego and my pride gravitated me towards that, even though it was the absolute wrong thing for me to do. You see what happened with Rudy, though, right? He couldn't, his irrelevance, significance is very important to him. His irrelevance made him crazy to the point where he destroyed himself. If you really understand yourself, stay true to yourself. You don't have to do stupid stuff. I made a mistake. I've owned it.
There's a great West Wing episode where a staffer becomes chief of staff and the Secret Service wakes her up at 6 a.m. and sits her down and says, listen, this is how your life is going to change. So let's leave aside the drama for a minute and take us inside your tenure at the White House. I know you're a student of history and have probably read a lot about the presidency, but what was it like for you to go from one day, you're Anthony, you're sitting in this office, and then the next day you're in the Oval?
There's nothing that you can do in your life that can prepare you for any of that. Nothing. And even if you worked in it before, it can't prepare you because the world is changing. Trump wasn't prepared for it. Bill Clinton wasn't prepared for it. Bush wasn't prepared. The staff's not prepared for it. There's nothing you can do in your life that can prepare you for that. So you're just not prepared. Moreover, it's an impossible job. Every one of the jobs inside the West Wing is an impossible job. So then you have to figure out how you're going to operate in that world of impossibility. And last piece, whatever you've read is not a reality. It's an academic version of what's happening. Okay, Trump said something to me that was really funny. And this happened actually on a Tuesday, and I know because I was only there for one Tuesday. I was there for 2 Mondays, by the way, and a couple Saturdays and Sundays, but I was only there for one Tuesday. Trump said to me, we were sitting in his study off the Oval Office, we were eating a hamburger, and he looked at me and he said, I thought I was a killer. I worked in the real estate, I'm a billionaire, I was fighting it off with other real estate moguls. I thought I was a killer. He goes, these secretaries down here stab your eyeball out. He said, they'll stab you in the eye with an ice pick, they'll drop your eyeball in a martini glass, and they'll talk to you like nothing happened. And you're bleeding at the table, and they're talking to you. It's a weird place. It's a vicious place. And I'm not saying Wall Street's not tough, but we all are on the green team on Wall Street. All right, so this is a podcast, so I'm showing you the green, right? This is what Wall Street is about. So we're all on the green team. So if you hate my guts, and I hate your guts, but there's $1 billion on the table, you have to fake liking me, I have to fake liking you to split the $1 billion. Are we going to do that? We're going to 100% do that, right? You know that, and I know that. But in Washington, there's no green team. It's blue teams, red team. You don't know what the hell's going on. Reince Priebus wanted access, and he wanted to be on top of the president. He wanted to have total control. The only way you have power in Washington is by giving up the power. The only way you have control in a place like Washington, you got to give up the control. And so he was holding on to it, and so everyone was shooting at him. So it is unlike anything I've ever experienced in my life. And I don't have any, it's not for me.
Is there any comparison, parallels between the way that the Oval is run and the way investment offices are run? The way that people become isolated from information?
Yes, but remember, there's different ways to run the Oval, right? Mm-hmm. Richard Neustadt wrote a great book called Presidential Power. You could have a White House model where you and your team sit down and you say, okay, here's our coordination. And then you filter out the policy to the 19 cabinets and sub-cabinets, the agencies of the executive branch of government, and you execute it that way. Or you could have a cabinet model where you turn to the cabinet and say, this is my general idea what I want to do. You execute it at your level. Okay, but in order for the executive branch to fully function, there has to be a symphony between the cabinets. So meaning Treasury needs justice. Justice may need Treasury. State needs the Pentagon. State may need Treasury, particularly if the sanctions are going to be imposed on a political adversary. And so the system is set up so that there has to be a cross fabric of interaction between everybody. See, Trump's problem was he has no executive skills. He didn't have the capability of setting it up that way. And so therefore there was no orchestration. And then the other thing he did, he scared everybody. Because if you are a lifetime bureaucrat in Washington, or you're in commerce, or you're a Treasury, or you're a senior guy, you don't want to get tweeted at. You get treated at, you get humiliated by the President of the United States, it could be a real big career derailment. There was a cabinet official, he came up here on a book tour, he went to Morning Joe. It was 2019, October. He said, Mooch, can I see you? I said, yeah, no problem. I'd already said Trump is a disaster. He came and sat on that couch right there, and he said to me, we're going to have a disaster. I said, why are you saying that? He said, because of what I just described. No one's operating with each other. If we have a crisis, the executive branch of the government is going to be immobilized by Trump because they're afraid they're going to get tweeted at by him. In January, we shot Soleimani. We sent a rocket, and he was on an airfield. We caught him. We shot him with a Predator drone, killed him. And we thought there was going to be huge backlash from the Iranians for this. I called that cabinet member, that former cabinet member. I said, is this the crisis? He said, it might be, but it wasn't. The Iranians de-escalated, but it was COVID-19. COVID-19, the government was totally ill-prepared at the executive level. And because of the dislike of Trump, things got politicized. Drug therapies got politicized. The vaccine got politicized. Our whole process was an us versus them movement as we were trying to deal with public health and safety. And so now we do everything hard left or hard right. Public health and safety, there's a hard left view and there's a hard right view. Securities exchange on things like Bitcoin, hard left view, hard right view. No right or wrong anymore. It used to be, you know what, we got to get this right as a group of people or it's going to really suck for the country if we get it wrong. But now it's no, this is our hard left position, this is the hard right position. And they whip each other. and they whip each other. You can't vote for that. If you vote for that on the left, we're going to get you primary. We've really created this oligarchic duopoly that is really hurting the country. And they spend money like drunken sailors. So you're a Wall Street guy, family office guy. You can't spend 6.5% to 7% of the GDP. You can't. You're at full employment. You're spending 6 to 7% of the GDP on deficit spending when the country's at full employment. We're not at war. What are you guys doing? What are you doing? And the answer is we have been living on a continuing resolution since 2011. You can't run the government like that. But they cannot get it together. And I'm going to indict Obama, I'm going to indict Trump, and I'm going to indict Biden. They never pulled the country together. And a good president would have got on the road and would have went to every congressional district. He said, you know what I'm doing? I'm going to 435 congressional districts, and I'm going to ask the citizens of this country to help me get you to the table to end the continuing resolutions and to actually put a budget together so that we can create a long-term plan to address the entitlements, the budget, all those things. And so he said, you can't do that because these people don't want to do that, and they have corrupted the system where the country's checked out of the system. You know what the most powerful voting bloc is in this country? And they vote the same way every single election. There's 144 million people.
Italians?
No, the Italians are a small group, although the high population here. And so if I ever really ran for office, I'd have to get all the Italians behind me. But the 144 million people are the non-voters. Every single election, we have 49 to 55% of the people do not vote. Okay, so you have to think about this. This plays to the oligarchic duopoly. So these people know this. They love it. They sit on the extremes. They gerrymander their adversaries out of their congressional districts. Are you in a democracy if the politician's picking the voter? I thought the voter was supposed to pick the politician. So we got these congressional districts now that look like jigsaw puzzles. They used to look like geometric shapes that you and I could recognize from ninth grade geometry, but now they look like jigsaw puzzles. So we're going to strain everybody out. We're going to get half the country super upset where they check out of the system, they don't vote, and then we're going to control the system.
Let's talk about SALT. 16 years in, where does SALT fit in the universe of Milken, the WEF, et cetera?
Yeah.
Where do you think it? How's it evolved?
So SALT has gone through phases. And SALT is, for me, Wolfgang Puck came to SALT in Singapore, and he said that Spago is a 40-year-old restaurant. And every 7 years, he has to break Spago down, close it, and renovate it. And every 5 years, he's got to make material changes to the menu. And if he does that, it's going to stay alive. And if he doesn't do that, it's going to shrink and it's going to die. And so SALT is like a little bit of an accordion. It was hugely expanded in 2015, 16, 17. That was peak SALT in terms of size and scale, high-profile people, Las Vegas. I didn't have a SALT in 2018 because of the whole White House situation and CFIUS, and we had the company sold, and then it got blocked by CFIUS. We returned to Vegas in 2019, and we were expanding the accordion. Then we got hit with COVID-19. And so what ended up happening to us, I made a decision, make SALT smaller, move SALT to New York, and let's regroup. And so after a couple of years of doing that now, SALT's in expansion mode again. We'll probably move SALT to the Bahamas. I've got a few people that I'm going to probably team up with. It'll never be Milken. It'll never be the World Economic Forum because it's not a non-for-profit like Milken or the Economic Forum.
Is it profitable?
Marginally profitable. We made money this year in SALT.
So how does it fit in with the whole flywheel, the whole Skybridge brand?
The flywheel for me with SALT is it originally started, I wanted to help the industry and raise awareness for hedge fund investing. It's morphed into a think tank, thought leadership space, and we're going to expand it now into a private equity, crypto, and public policy event. And so you probably didn't come to Crypto Bahamas. Did you come to Crypto Bahamas?
No.
Okay, so that was probably our bet. We've done this for 15 years. This is probably a sign it was the absolute peak of life, okay, because we had an event with Sam Bankman-Fried in the Bahamas at the Baha Mar. We had 2,500 people, and we had the who's who of Wall Street there, the who's who of crypto, and we had guys like Bill Clinton, Prime Minister Blair, President Bill Clinton. We had celebrities there like Tom Brady and Giselle. We had Orlando Bloom, Katy Perry. We had this wild, very high-profile event. And I was planning SALT 2023. In fact, we had the hotel booked when Sam declared his bankruptcy in November of 2022, and then we discovered that Sam was a fraud and that he was misallocating funds. And so I would like to go back to the Bahamas. Our team met with the government down there, and I don't want that country to be penalized or punished by what happened with the FTX story and their move to the Bahamas and the whole fiasco. And so Henry Chang is a longtime client of mine. He owns the Rosewood, and he also owns the Baha Mar complex. And I want to go back there, and I want to have a bigger event. Will it be Milken or Davos or things like that? No, I don't think it can be that. But it'll be our style of things. I tell people, if Mike Milken's the Boston Pops, we're the Chainsmokers. And that's how I think of it. And you have to just decide what music you want today. It's never going to play the orchestra at SALT.
So you run a prominent conference. Talk to me a bit about how you plan your time at other events. Like if you're going to go to Davos, how do you prep for that? How do you make the best use of your time there?
So I'm a big believer in non-transactional activity. I'm a big believer in not forcing networking. That's just my big belief. And so Davos, we came up with a very good idea, which is a byproduct actually of somebody else's idea. We started a wine party in Davos maybe 15 years ago. And so that's really the only event that I'm focused on in Davos. Will I speak on a panel? Sure. Will I go to some other events? I will. But my focus in Davos is on our wine party. And it's a pretty high profile wine party. We can limit, fortunately we only have 300 people. There's a 3,000 person delegation at Davos, so we have to limit it to 300 people because of the size constraints associated with the venue. And we serve really popular, very high priced wines, and it's a super popular event. And I will say to you that when I first started going to Davos, I didn't understand the place, and I was like probably wasting my money and my time going to Davos. And that was a mistake.
Why do you say that?
Because I wasn't invited to the reindeer games of Davos. Okay, I'm not going to the event that Bill Gates is hosting or Mark Zuckerberg, and I felt like I was on the periphery of Davos. And that was a mistake. And this is a big lesson to people. Stay in things. Don't walk away from things. Don't be a short timer. Don't be, how can I say this? Don't day trade things. Don't day trade your career. Don't day trade your relationships. If you make a commitment to doing something, so I stuck it out. I said, I'm going to stay and see if I can make this work for me and my firm, this big networking opportunity, this big thought leadership event known as Davos. And that served us very well. We were able to get the Citibank merger done. We bought that fund of funds from Citibank. I met with Vikram Pandit in Davos. I met with Jane Fraser in Davos, who went on to become the CEO. Michael Corbett, who sold me the business, became the CEO of Citibank. I would have never met any of those people had I not gone to Davos. I was able to meet them the way you and I are meeting right now. And it was definitely non-transactional, and it was definitely validating. You know, they could see me and say, he's going to do a good job with that business. Our clients are in that business that we're selling to him. He's not going to embarrass us. So the message for people, go to these conferences, show up. Don't be lazy about it, but don't be overly forceful either.
Let's talk about Skybridge. How many investors do you have now?
6,000.
6,000.
Yeah. Remember, this is a mom and pop shop, so this was a populist idea. You know, $50,000 minimums, you know, $25,000 minimums in certain places. I wanted to bring hedge funds to the masses. I adapted the business 4 years ago. We said, okay, we got a lot of people that couldn't get access to hedge funds that are getting access. I want people to get a better understanding of the blockchain. I want them to understand Bitcoin. And we were 4 years ahead of BlackRock in Bitcoin. We were behind Grayscale, but we were 4 years ahead of BlackRock.
I did a rough breakdown of the portfolio. I'd say it's a little over a third Bitcoin, a third legacy funds like 0.72, Millennium, and maybe a third credit. Is that about right, roughly?
Roughly. It's moving around a lot. I mean, the crypto's expanding because of the price appreciation, yeah.
So you've spoken a great deal about crypto, but I'd actually be very interested in hearing your thesis about the other two-thirds of the port.
So I'm rewriting the little book of hedge funds. I wrote a book 12 years ago, and the second edition is going to come out hopefully by the end of the year. And like everything in life, you get a lot wrong when you're predicting the future. And so at the time of the writing of that book in 2012, the industry was 1.9 trillion. I said in 10 years, the industry would be over $6 trillion. I got it wrong. I think it's $3.8 trillion 12 years later. And so what happened to the hedge fund industry? It didn't shrink, but it didn't grow in line with the market activity, meaning stock market. In other words, if you had $1.9 trillion and you just went up alongside of the S&P, you would have had more than $6 trillion in 12 years. But what happened? Zero interest rates hurt the industry because if you're hedging and you're short stuff in a zero interest rate market, the low interest rates are forcing those assets up in value. We both know interest rates are the physical gravity of financial assets. Low rates, higher asset price. And so people don't need hedge funds when you have zero interest rate policy because you do poorly. Your hedges are going up and your longs may be going up, but your hedges are going up and you're underperforming the market. And so why pay those prices when I can just get long NVIDIA or the S&P 500 in an ETF? And what I believe has happened, and I'm reflecting about this in the new book, is that there's 10, 20 superstar hedge fund managers that have built great multi-strat platforms. And they have access and resources and access to management teams and venture capital and economists and policymakers and politicians, whatever it may be, where they actually do have an edge over the other people. 0.72, Millennium, Third Point, Elliott, the ones that are in there are representations of that. The credit stuff, that's been our life's blood from day one. And so we are credit, this is a credit shop. We cut back the credit after the 2020 debacle because unfortunately with the credit, it is a little bit like picking up pennies in front of a steamroller. It looks great until the tsunami rolls in, right? And one of the things about Wall Street that you and I know is axiomatic. We have on Wall Street, the 1,000-year flood happens every 5 years. And so every 5 years, you get crushed in these credit markets. Or maybe it's every 7 years. And in 2020, this firm got devastated. I had the worst year of my career in the month of March. Okay, so I had a really bad year in 1 month. I think we were down 20 in March of 2020. We got COVID-19 wrong. We were long a ton of credit. We thought the rates were stable to low. We thought the unemployment was going to stay at 2%. I did not expect a $4 billion person disruption known as COVID-19. And by the way, I left a meeting in Davos. You were talking about Davos. I left the meeting in Davos in January. There were 3 other hedge fund managers in that meeting. All 4 of us went down 20% in the month of March in 2020 because we walked out of the meeting. The World Health Organization guy said, nah, it's going to be like SARS or MERS. It's not going to explode across the world. So I was totally misallocated, and I totally did not anticipate the risk of that. And this is a big lesson for your family office, people that listen to your podcast. It's not the things that you know from a risk management perspective that get you in trouble. If you're worried about something, you're set up for it. It's the things that you think that you actually don't know. Like I said, when I left Lehman Brothers, if you said to me, what's going to happen to Lehman Brothers? Okay, the stock's at 40, it's going to go to 300 in 10 years. I was ready to bet the ranch on that. And Lehman wouldn't let me. I wanted to keep all my Lehman Brothers stock, but I left, so they wanted me to flush out the stock. But I would have kept it. Because you see, I'm a confident guy, and I knew with absolute certainty that Lehman Brothers was going to 300. But you know what? I didn't know. And it's the things that you think you know with absolute certainty that you actually don't know that you get destroyed on.
You haven't talked about COVID that much. That was our last big downturn.
Right.
So what was it like in the war room here? How did you guys handle take it into 2021?
So when you imagine this place, there was no war room because we were all locked in our houses. We were talking to each other over Zoom. We were talking to our clients over Zoom or calls. We were all scared about what was happening. Okay, we were getting calls in from the Morgan Stanleys of the world. They were going to cut us, downgrade us to sell, all this sort of stuff. And then we had to make a decision. Are we going to adapt and pivot this business? So I just want you to think about it, okay? Who killed the iPod? Steve Jobs killed the iPod. The iPod was a phenomenal product, but he knew that it was very easy with the technology modernizing to drop the iPod into the phone. So he says, someone's going to do it. It better be me. And you have to adapt and you have to change. And so in 2020, after we got the doors blown off, we said, you know what? We're moving some of these assets into Bitcoin and crypto. And we're going to do it early. We're going to do it at a time when traditional institutional asset holders are not willing to do it. Okay, because we see something that's going to add value to our clients if they're patient. And that has been a resounding success for us. We're way through the high water marks. If you were smart enough to stay with us, you have done very well. And if you were not smart enough to stay with us, I understand. We want you back. And if you don't want to come back, I understand that too, because people are weird with their money. Once they pull their money, it's hard to reload and go back to people that they pulled their money from. But I'm just letting you know, we adapted and pivoted this business so that we could take this business into the next decade that we're dealing with right now.
You guys having a good year?
We are having the best year that we've ever had. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about it, but I can talk about it this way. In May of 2023, Bitcoin was at 26%. You just told me a third of the assets are in crypto.
Mm-hmm.
Today, Bitcoin's at 70,000. So we're up 160% on that position. Okay, and plus the other stuff is done well. So we're having record performance for Skybridge, and we have very good risk management ratio on what's going on. And I predict this. We had a great year last year, and I predict that this will also be a great year. But I'm not certain. And what I said earlier, people should think about whatever you think is going to happen, it may not happen. So you better not be that overconfident, smug, arrogant dude, because that's how you get your doors blown off. And that's how we got our doors blown off in 2020.
You're very much about relationships. I wonder how that complicates your portfolio decisions when people go through a rough spot.
It's a really good question. We stay with people when they're in rough spots. We don't stay with them because it's a relationship-driven thing. We stay with them because it's a cultural thing. A manager can get things wrong and still be long-term right. Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway, go look at the chart. 4 periods of time since 1965 where Berkshire dropped 50%. And if you stayed in Berkshire, you did very well. And to me, it's not a relationship thing as much as it's an empirical thing. I'm not leaving Steve Cohen if he has a bad year. Yes, Steve Cohen's a personal friend of mine. Yes, I go to the owner's box and hang out with him at Met games. But I'm not leaving him if it's a bad year. It's not the relationship aspect of that's going to make me stay. It is the empirical data that suggests that we do go through periods of bad years. But staying with guys like Steve Cohen have proved to be rewarding. And the people that stayed with Skybridge have gotten rewarded.
So you know all these great investors. Do you think these top managers handle their personal financial lives well?
No. They suck at it. And it's like the old adage that the shoemaker's shoes always look the worst. They suck at it. I gave my money to a guy named Frank Marzano 10 years ago because I sucked at it 10 years ago. And I said, okay, I got my money in this and I got my money in that. It's thrown all over the place in the back of the financial closet. And so I gave my money to a really good financial advisor who sorted everything out for me. Got me the right T&E guy, got me the right will, got me the right life insurance package, helped me sort out my expenses, and I would be embarrassed to tell you how many Amazon subscriptions I had that I wasn't using.
What mistakes do you think these guys make?
Money managers.
Money managers.
So overconfidence is the number one mistake for a money manager. And unfortunately, I have lived that overconfidence. I have to be honest about it. I think you have to own up to your mistakes, because if you don't own up to your mistakes, you repeat them. No. You don't want to be that person that can't deal with the truth. And so money managers have a hard time with that. Okay, and if you get too emotionally tied to something, that's a big mistake. But the X factor is the thing that I enjoy with money managers. And what do I call it, the X factor? There are money managers, there's a glass behind you, they'll go right through the glass to make the money for the clients. They'll eat right through the wallboard. So if they're having a bad time, you know they don't care. They're going to get up off the mat and hit it. But the mistakes are the overconfidence. Mistakes are, they could be misallocated. If I'm being brutally honest, we were overconfident in our credit positions, and we were overallocated to credit, and we didn't see a meteor strike coming. And if we get hit with the meteor, it would hurt the credit market, and we didn't handle it well. But we made an adaptation and we adjusted. If you stayed with us, you were fine. But people do get nervous. You remember, you're living in a 100,000-year-old piece of machinery. Hasn't had a software upgrade in 100,000 years. So it's the same brain that your ancestors were hitting each other in the heads and rocks and caves. And so you have to get out of that mindset. There's primordial aspects of your brain that will make you run when it's the right time to buy. And you have to switch up your mindset. When the bullets are flying at you, you can't run. You got to run towards the bullets.
Greatly enjoyed the new book. One of the questions that popped into my mind was, what are some of the blue-collar beliefs that will get in your way on the street? What's the difference between Anthony Auto Glass and Anthony Hedge Fund?
Yeah. I'm not a club guy. I'm an outsider. I'm not even an outer borough guy, right? Trump's got a chip on his shoulder because he's from the outer borough. He wants to be a player. I have no interest in that. I still live on Long Island. I still drive out there every night to be with my family. I live 2 miles from my cousins and my mother. And I live near Anthony Auto Glass and Anthony Deli and Anthony Clamor, okay, because those are my people. And so I'm not a club guy. A blue collar guy like me doesn't like the club. I just don't like it. But if I liked it, I would be probably richer. And I would do the hand signals that they do in the club to make more money for myself. But I'm not really that interested in that. You know, I want to help my family. I want to take care of my employees, and I want to be me. I don't want to conform. There's capitalists, and then there's capital artists. I want to be a capital artist. I don't want to be a capitalist. I'm not interested in it, which is why I go hard at the politics now, because I want to be on record. I see the danger, okay? I have studied the history, and I see the danger. I don't want to have the superficial Wall Street jerk-off analysis. Every 50-year-old white guy on Wall Street assumes that Trump's going to be better because he's got pro-business policies. I see the danger. I understand how fragile the democracy is.
Do you think he did anything good for the financial services market when he was in office?
I think superficially he has pro-business policies. But the meta data on Trump is very bad, and the macro data on Trump is very bad. There are 50 of us that work for him that know he sucks. There are 50 of us. And so if we were working for the pharmaceutical company, we told you the pill's going to kill you, you're going to take the pill. I don't get it with the politics in this country right now. I understand the grievance because I worked in a supermarket. I worked on a loading dock. I shoveled stone. I understand the grievance. We took aspirational blue-collar families, we turned them into desperational ones. I'm not making light of that. But he's provided no policy solution. Biden has done more. He's reshored. He's got the CHIPS Act. He put $250 billion to work rebuilding manufacturing in the country. And he's in the process of rebuilding. And Trump was right about the tariffs with China. If China's going to play unfairly in the trade game, Trump was right about that. But Trump is wrong to say that he's going to use the FBI as the Gestapo. Can't say that. I mean, thank God the guy's not intelligent, so he doesn't really know what the Gestapo means. But come on, you can't talk like that. Now, he's got great political instincts. He was anti-crypto, now he's pro-crypto. That's going to help him. But no, he hasn't done anything material to help anybody. And he crushed New York with the SALT tax. And it hurt the U.S. economy. When I was talking to Trump in December of 2017, he asked me about the SALT tax deduction. I said, it's a disaster. That's one of those like Heritage Foundation think tank moves. It's a disaster. These coastal cities teem with immigrants. The immigrants that come in here are generally poor. Sergey Brin, when he showed up, he was poor. Okay? And so you need to have, if you want to build a great aspirational society, you need laboratories like New York and Boston and Philadelphia and San Francisco and Los Angeles for immigration. You need these laboratories. And these laboratories need safety nets. Okay? And to really understand that the engines of the growth for the entire country are coming through these cities. If you cut the state and local tax deduction limitation, you limit it, people are going to migrate. They're going to go to Texas and Florida, which they did, and other low-tax states like Tennessee, and you're going to miss the opportunity for the Sergey Brins. What are you doing? Okay? Sergey Brin doesn't show up with money. Albert Einstein's not showing up with money. He's coming to New York for opportunity, and you need a landing strip for these people. And to really understand it from a socioeconomic perspective, you don't do what he did. We are so superficial in the country now that we're operating off of the jingoism of the politician. And because Biden no longer looks like your grandfather, he looks like your great-grandfather. He don't look like your grandfather anymore. He can't sell what he's doing for the country. He can't sell the legislative agenda that's been successful, and he can't get out there and explain that the inflation is not his fault because it's situational. We know that. You're smart enough to know that. If Trump won the election, people would be personalizing the inflation on Trump because things that are situational get personalized. It's Biden's job growth. It's Trump's job losses. Is that fair to Trump? He was dealing with COVID. He lost 21 million jobs. Is that fair to Trump, or did COVID happen on his watch and he dropped 21 million jobs? So we don't have anybody out there explaining it.
What did you learn from John Kelly?
A lot. I write about it in the book. First of all, we were very sore at each other when he fired me. He totally missized me. If you ever get a chance to interview Kelly, he totally missized me. He thought I was a wise-ass New York punk that was overly tied to Trump. Okay, and he thought I had that MAGA lilt to my personality. He didn't see my centrism or my historical understanding of the country. And he didn't really understand I was part of BENS, the Business Executives for National Security. And he wasn't aware that I had made troop support missions I visited Afghanistan to see the troops and Iraq as a civilian. And so he totally missized me. But I totally missized him. And so we were very sore at each other in the beginning. When he got fired, my partner, John Darcy, called me and said, he's available to speak on the speaker circuit. Do you want to invite him to SALT? And I said, I do. I said, this is a true story. This is how nuts the world is. I was going into the Big Brother house, the reality show. I said, look, I'm not going to be able to talk to you for 10 days. Okay, call Kelly, call his speaker's agency, and tell Kelly he's got to come to SALT. And Kelly thought it was a crank phone call. All right, so John's calling, and he got on the phone with Kelly. He said, Anthony wants to invite you to SALT. That was a crank phone call. Then he thought it was going to be some type of a antagonistic shit show for him. And John said, I think you got Anthony totally misread. Why don't you come have lunch with Anthony? So Kelly came here, and we had a 4-hour lunch. It went from 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock. We talked about the whole world. We talked about the Marine Corps. We talked about Trump. We talked about the danger of Trump. We went around the world. And when we left there, we shook hands, and we've done 7 speaking engagements around the world together. And I just had dinner with his wife at the Marine Corps Scholarship Foundation dinner with my wife, Deirdre. And it's a story about miscommunication. It's a story about profiling. He was profiling me. I was profiling him. And we had so much more in common than we both originally thought. And now we're personal friends.
What do you think it was about him that he came out of that mostly unscathed?
He's a decent, honorable guy with incredible integrity. He's a 4-star general, served 40 years in the Marine Corps, and he's a Gold Star family member. Okay. And what Trump did to Kelly is, to me, unforgivable. You don't stand there with Kelly at a cemetery and mock the dead veterans of the country. You don't do that. How is he getting a pass from these people that are supporting him on that? I thought you guys are MAGA patriots. He's mocking the dead veterans that freed France and made the United States and the free world safe for democracy and aspirational freedom. 5.7 billion people in this world live under tyranny and dictatorship. And because you don't understand what it's like to live under dictatorship. And this is the problem in this country. They don't get the specter of a dictator. When you are living in London or you live in France, you go on field trips. You go to the Blitz, you go to the war cabinet rooms, you go visit Normandy. If you're in Germany, you go up to Eastern Poland and you visit the concentration camps. And they teach you about dictatorship, which is why when someone's asked in the UK, would you vote for Trump? They say, no. What the hell is he doing this close to the power? But here, because Franklin Roosevelt was a good politician, he put down the America First movement, we don't fully understand, we don't have the historical memory of fascism in our hereditary system or our DNA. It's a very dangerous time for the world. And so I want to be on record. It hurts my business. It's going to piss off 50% of the people that are listening to your podcast. But I don't care. I want to be on record because I know how dangerous it is. And Esper said at SALT, or Milley said, I will take policy from Biden that I don't agree with over a full-on disaster for the country. Well, let's wait this guy out, sweat this guy out, till we can get to somebody normal that respects the institutions and the system of the democracy, the Republican nature of the democracy, and the Constitution.
What have you learned from Mike Milken?
He's the smartest guy I know. You can tell Mike, I said that. He is a polymath. He's incredibly well-read, but he's also a critical thinker. What I learned from Mike Milken is that there's 25 ways to look at a problem. And everyone looks at the problem one way, but if you stop and you look at it from 25 different angles, you're going to come up with a more creative solution. And what I also learned from Mike Milken is that you never, ever give up in any circumstance. You want to lock my ass up and put me in jail and make me pay billions of dollars of fines, no problem. I'm going to build a 30-year career after that. Mike Milken's a humanitarian, and he's been a great addition to this society called America.
What'd you learn from Mitt Romney?
Love Mitt. And if Mitt won in 2012, this would be a totally different country because he would have moved the country to a softer place. This became a coarser place. Obama created Trump. Let's just get that on the record. And Barack Obama knows that. He'd be very mad at me for saying it because you don't like admitting the truth to yourself. But he did create Trump. How did he create Trump? He had policies that created a white lash. Okay, that's number one. And then the second thing that he created Trump with is he stopped Biden from running against Hillary Clinton in 2016. And Trump's rise is actually the story of the failed Hillary Clinton candidacy. The worst presidential candidate in history didn't even go to Wisconsin after the convention. We were traveling all over the place. And she lost the Electoral College but won the popular vote. So that was a disaster. Okay, and she didn't work hard enough to be the president. And something about the people, they know. People want you to sweat that job. They don't want you to think it's anointed or ordained. They want you to sweat the job. Okay, and she didn't do that. What I learned from Mitt, be nice, be good to your family, think about policies from right or wrong, not necessarily left or right. But also speak your truth. Mitt had Trump earlier than me. He gave a speech in March of 2016, and he had Trump earlier than me. And then he did a little bit of what we all did. He was thinking about being the Secretary of State and all that stuff, and then Trump stuffed him because he likes doing that. But he went through the Trump rinse cycle, like all of us. But he's an awesome human being. He's a great American.
Do you think asset allocation can be taught, or is it an art?
No, I think asset allocation can be taught. But I don't know about mental discipline. Okay, because I think I can teach you how to asset allocate and make yourself very rich. If you're there, you have no money, and you got 30 years, I can get you rich. But I got to get you disciplined. You got to spend a little less money. You got to pay yourself first. And you have to stay in things. Okay? And you have to stay in things. People bailed on Bitcoin at 17,000 in 2022. I'm out. Bitcoin sucks. You suck. You know, I was a genius in 2021 when Bitcoin was up here. Then I was a dummy when Bitcoin was down here. I'm not a genius. I'm not a dummy. I'm somewhere in the middle. But if you have the discipline, you can be a long-term genius. You can't believe your own bullshit. Once you do that, you get yourself in trouble. And that's the big lesson of my book. Pride, your ego, your overconfidence are your enemies. Be on watch.
So maybe we could end at the beginning. You'd mentioned Dick Grosso, Ken Langone, and how those folks helped you get your start. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
I grew up with Dick, meaning, if you really want to know, this is probably more than you want to know, but Louis Campanelli, may his soul rest in peace, was my first real boss. He hired me at age 14. I got my work papers, and I was stocking shelves for him at the Key Food. So my parents needed the money, and so I went and got the job. I used to give the money to my mom. And Lou Campanelli was the kindest guy that you would ever meet, and he had 2 supermarkets. Okay, so he taught me how to cook rotisserie chicken. Okay, so I just want you to picture me with the apron on, looking like Lucille Ball with the hat and the gloves. And I used to take the syringes and baste the rotisserie chicken. This was part of my job. And I told him, Mr. Campanelli, I want to work on Wall Street, and I want to be a Wall Street guy. And so he introduced me to Dick Grosso, who at that time was clerking at the New York Stock Exchange. And so Dick lived in Manhasset, I lived in Port Washington, and he helped me think about what to do, what courses to take in college, and he introduced me to Vinnie Viola. Ken Langone, different story. My father knew Kenny. They were contemporaries. Kenny grew up in Roslyn, New York. My father grew up in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, but he arrived in Port Washington, New York to work in the sand mines in the 1950s, and he got to meet the Langone family. Kenny's father was a plumber, so my father got to know him. I think he moonlighted for him a little bit. The first time I met Kenny I was probably 15. I was walking into he still has the office here on Park Avenue, and those guys helped me out a lot, helped me with my career, helped me when I got my first business started.
Anthony Scaramucci, thank you for joining us today and sharing your great insights.
I appreciate being on with you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the podcast, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or share it with your friends. Thank you.